Hello, everyone. Welcome back. Hope everyone enjoyed the poster session. I know it's a little short, but for folks that are online, you could join it through GatherTown and can see more about it. So now we have our final session of the day, which is the mentorship program and the mentorship panelists. We have two amazing mentors here from the industry, and we have a few folks online, and Wayner, our mentorship chair, is going to be driving the whole conversation. So Wayner, take it away.
So, hello everyone. So we are heading this conversation is a panel between the mentors from industry and also from here the attendees to ask some questions. But basically we want to start this conversation about a short description about where you should work and any type of the job that you did in the past, basically. Okay. So I think we can start.
Okay, should I start?
Yeah.
Okay, my name is Brian. I was originally born in Colombia, but I've been living in Europe most of my life, so specifically in Spain. My background is in robotics. Now that you were asking what I used to do robotic manipulation. That's how I started at Amazon as an applied scientist. But nowadays I completely changed my topic. Now I'm working on what we call item data quality issues, finding attributes that are incorrect or missing from our catalog, so customers can trust what they see in the detailed pages. And this is mostly doing with very different sources of data, like the images, the product description, and also the customer reviews.
Hello everyone, my name is Pablo Samuel Castro. I'm originally from Ecuador and I work in Google Brain. I do research in reinforcement learning and fundamental reinforcement learning, so this is core algorithms, but also lately my focus is mostly on getting a better empirical understanding of deep networks in the context of reinforcement learning. And in addition to that, I also do some work in machine learning and creativity.
We also have two mentors that they are online. So I used to present to Fabian Cava. So he's researching Adobe. Fabian, can you describe yourself?
Yeah. So yeah. First of all, thank you for the invite. Yes. First summary of my career. I'm originally from Colombia. I did my master's in Colombia and then went to Saudi Arabia to do a PhD in computer vision. My research topic is in video understanding, and nowadays I work at Adobe. I still do a lot of work and a lot of research in video understanding and multimodal learning, but I'm also interested in creativity and video editing applications of computer vision technologies.
All right. And also we have René Vidal. Hello, René. Can you introduce yourself?
Yes, thank you. So my name is René. I am an Amazon scholar in the search org within Amazon. And in particular, I work with the visual search and augmented reality team. Amazon scholars are usually faculty members at some university. I'm actually a professor at Johns Hopkins. And so I spend my time in both Johns Hopkins and Amazon. I am originally from Chile. I did my PhD in computer vision and machine learning at Berkeley, and I've worked in computer vision and machine learning ever since.
All right. So we want to start just this conversation, this discussion. So if anyone have any questions so far, feel free to ask a question. If so, I can ask a question. So I know that most of them we work on industry, right? So what does a successful job candidate looks like for you? Who wants to start?
I can do it. In my experience, I think it's someone who is not only worry about what they can achieve in research terms, but what they can solve for the industry they are applying to, meaning they have also like a mind focused on solving the business problems that they will have. That is a must, I would say, in my opinion.
So in the team where I'm working on, it's a bit of a special team, I guess, within industry, because I'd say we have one foot in industry and perhaps even a larger foot in academia, in that we're not tied to any product that Google produces. So that gives us a bit more flexibility to just research whatever our expertise guides us towards. And so for us, a successful candidate is somebody obviously who works very hard, but who can also, think analytically about problems and think critically about problems and how to solve new problems within their area of expertise, but also outside of their area of expertise. Because often you'll need to learn new techniques, new skills, and apply them to whatever problem you're working on. So it's really about being able to be strong in problem solving and analysis, and also be a good person to work with. So you can be a genius, but if you're hard to work with, we're not going to be as interested in you.
Yeah, thank you. What about you, Toph, René?
I think I agree with what's been said. I think being very smart, it's important, but also having good people skills is important. But I would add that it's having, I think, the right combination of being very much interested in solving the problem. For Amazon, I think working backwards from the customer, it's very important, and therefore having the ability to translate the research that you learn during your PhD into something that is concrete and that will impact the customer is of great importance. So the idea that you're going to be able to pick up many tools that exist and be able to apply them and modify them and understand them, but also expand upon them, it's, I think, also very important.
And what about you, Fabian?
Yeah, I pretty much agree with all that's been said so far. I'm probably in a similar situation as Pablo. I'm also in a research organization, so we don't directly have to think about the products, especially interns, or let's say an intern candidate or a new hire doesn't have to think immediately into the products. It's more like a long-term thinking about how this research may be beneficial about certain products we're interested in. So pretty much logical thinking and being able to solve hard problems. I think that's one characteristic we look for. Definitely, I think being able to communicate your ideas is essential, right? Because you're going to be working with a team of people, so you should be able to communicate clearly your ideas and being active, sharing it with the whole team and the whole organization.
Very nice. Do we have any question here in the room? Anyone I want to ask something? So we have a question.
Hello? Okay, I think this is working. My question is more generic, right? I think some of you have shared that part of the team you work on can do more academic research work than tied to be a product. But your experience that I think most of you, if not all of you, are in the industry, how easy is to switch from the industry to an academic position and from academic position to the industry and so on? So what is your experience in that sense?
Anyone want?
I'm more familiar with the latter, so going from academia to industry. I have a lot of colleagues that have taken that path. Although I think we're in a sort of special period in our field where we have lots of hybrid positions. So a lot of my colleagues are adjunct professors in universities, and so they supervise PhD students, but they're still full-time employees with Google. And this was, when I finished my PhD, this was not available at all. So either you went into academia or you went into more of an applied position in industry. So I think now there's a bit more flexibility in terms of you don't necessarily have to make that hard choice whether you're going to be in industry or in academia. There are possibilities where you can do a bit of both. especially with labs like Brain and other teams. I know other companies I know have similar positions. I haven't seen too many people go from industry into academia that didn't already have that as an established path. So some people will join industry for a year or two, and under their signed agreement, they're doing that position before going into academia to be a full-time professor. That's the path I know. But I think because of this hybrid model that we have now, there's lots of opportunities and flexibility for whatever it is people would like to do with their career.
Yeah, we have a question online.
Okay, go ahead.
Yeah, so Pablo is asking, what is the most common weakness of unsuccessful candidates?
Okay, I think that we can start with the online sponsor panelists. You can start, Fabian.
Right. So yeah, yeah. I think I'm gonna emphasize like one thing I really like. I mean, like strong candidates for me are like people that actually can communicate their ideas clearly. So I think Pablo mentioned something. You can be a genius, but if you can't communicate it, I think that you're gonna have a hard time probably in industry because you need to work with a team. So I think one of the things I'm always on the look for is like if like the candidate is able to communicate clearly. So I think I would post that as a big weakness. Yeah, but I don't know, like others can chime in with additional weaknesses.
Hello. What about you, Renee?
Yes, I'm happy to answer both questions. I'll begin with the last question. For me, an important weakness is I think when trying to interview the most recent generation, namely the generation that was trained during the deep learning era, we've seen, for example, candidates that they may have not been trained on what computer vision was about before deep learning. And what this means is that when solving concrete real world problems, the ability to draw from multiple techniques and maybe do hybrids, or maybe there might be pre-existing software that was based on previous techniques. The fact that candidates might not have a deep understanding of what really computer vision is about, it's a problem and it's a weakness in my view. And so I would encourage new or upcoming PhD students to be trained on things other than deep learning, because sure, they're going to be using deep learning every day, but I think if all what you know is deep learning, you're going to have a difficulty understanding problems. And so the question of problem formulation and let's say, for example, learning about geometry or learning about photometry are things that are also important. I want to also say a little bit about the previous question, which is the transition from academia to industry and vice versa. I just went through the transition from academia to industry. And I think today is relatively seamless in that what is being done in industry, it's not very different from what's being done in academia. I'd say that certainly it is the case that problems in industry are more applied. And at the same time, there is more data and more resources, and data is a bit more complex than what can happen in academia. The transition backwards, I think today maybe industry is in certain ways more attractive at the senior level, both in terms of packages and salaries and whatnot. And so it's harder. And I also wanted to make a comment regarding this question as to what was more than 10 years ago versus what it is today. So more than 10 years ago, with a few exceptions, and say maybe Microsoft Research was one such exception, work in industry was much more applied, and work in academia was in various ways more theoretical. So the distance was much larger. And from that perspective, I think transition from academia to industry was very normal and happening regularly. But it was very hard for the university to recruit someone who had been in industry for some time, because their ability to do more basic research and publish was much harder. I think today, as it's been already spoken, there are many positions in industry that are very research focused. And so we have recruited in academia some faculty members who return to academia from industry. And the possibility to having hybrid positions, it's much more common. And I think my being an Amazon scholar is one example of one such hybrid position.
So I have also two questions. So we are researchers. So in my case, I am a student, PhD student, and also you work on industry. So what do you think, like, what are like the most challenge do you think like ML, machine learning, will be tackled over the next few years? You want to start? I mean, based on like in the specific like a research area that you work on.
For me, it's the scale of the amount of data we generate, and we don't know, like, we cannot label the world. For us in Amazon, it means we have new products coming in every day. We have customer writing reviews every day as well. And we cannot just say, oh, this is a good customer review, this is bad, or this product is of this color and this is of another color. We have to deal with this self-supervised or unsupervised learning, because like supervised has been working, but if we want to continue to grow, this is not going to continue scaling. We cannot have humans continuously annotating everything. And for me, I think that's the challenge we are starting to see and starting to tackle, but I think it remains still unsolved to do it in a larger scale.
For me, I think what I see as still an open area, an open field, is really getting a good understanding for what is actually happening with neural nets. So we do have some theory, but they tend to be either for just linear function approximators or special types of neural nets, for instance, infinite width neural nets or random matrix neural nets. And that's a great start, but I think there's still a big gap between that theoretical understanding and the empirical performance we have now with neural nets. So they're mostly a black box. And for running on benchmarks, this is probably fine, but when you start talking about applying these in the real world, self-driving cars or trying to help humans make decisions, then I think it becomes really critical to get a better understanding for what's happening, and perhaps new mechanisms for training these nets that provide greater interpretability and sensitivity analyses.
All right, thank you. And what about you, Rene?
Oh, so I think from the perspective of industry, I think I agree that the question of scalability is going to be critical. I would add the multimodal nature. In a sense, there has been dramatic progress on NLP, there has been dramatic progress in computer vision. I think we are seeing already the dramatic progress at the intersection of both text and vision. But moving forward, as which just mentioned, right, for most problems you see in industry, you're going to have a rich variety of multiple data types that need to be integrated, and you need to understand what data types are best for each particular application. The ability to transfer from to very small data sets. I think each new problem will be maybe small amounts of data, and the ability to transfer from massive data sets to those would be critical. I think from the perspective of academia, I think I completely agree with my previous colleague. Understanding theoretical foundations are essential. And at the intersection of both, I agree also with him that the ability to make algorithms interpretable and explainable. I think when they work, we don't know why they work, and when they fail, we don't know why they fail. and the ability for these algorithms to provide explanations of why they made the decisions they made, I think will be critical in industry also, because many products will eventually have AI, and some of them will be regulated. And as that happens, you need to understand why an algorithm made a certain decision. I think self-driving cars is going to be a critical example. In the case of an accident, who is going to be responsible and why? And those legal decisions will depend on the ability to explain why the algorithm decided that the car should accelerate or move left or move right, and then be right before the accident.
All right, thank you. And what about you, Fabian?
Yeah, so I pretty much agree with all things have been said so far. Like self-supervised learning definitely helpful for industry. Like annotating the word, it's gonna be like probably very difficult to do. Like if we want to annotate data for every single task we tackle, it's gonna be pretty hard to achieve. So yeah, scaling up self-supervised learning is maybe one interesting direction. I also agree a lot with what Renee mentioned before, like about being able to transfer those models to downstream tasks. I will add something here, being able to prevent forgetting, right? Like this is an actual research topic nowadays. It's like we have these large models, vision models, language models, and then if you fine tune those models into downstream tasks, you may be forgetting a lot of the knowledge you have learned in this large scale data you crawl from the internet. So being able to prevent forgetting, I think that's an interesting research topic. One thing I will add as well is also like encourage the community to actually build harder tasks. It's like, okay, we have tasks like image classification in computer vision and so on and so on. So what about like creating more harder tasks that actually like push to the limits the models we train on this massive amount of data, right? So I will say that's one component that has not been addressed lately. I think we have this standard benchmark, but what about creating new ones that are harder and harder over time?
All right, thank you. So I also wonder, I know that you're working on Amazon and you probably working on Google, and also Fabian work on Adobe, and Rene also in Amazon. Does your company has any like a program or initiative to LatinX community?
Yes, we do. Is this on? Yes, we do have many programs. There's a number of different approaches we've taken, and I've been lucky to be involved with a lot of them. So one of them is supporting workshops like this one in LatinX and AI. Google has been a sponsor since the beginning. And they've been very supportive of these types of efforts. And so it goes beyond just Latinx and AI. There's also Kipu, there's RIA. There's a lot of these events that are trying to increase the presence of Latin Americans in the research community. And so Google has been very supportive of that. The other thing that they've been very supportive of is with research grants. So there was recently a research program called Latin American Research Awards, where students that were based in Latin America could apply, and I think 6 or something won these awards. And so this gives them, it's both a financial award where they get cloud credits, but also they got the opportunity to come in as a student researcher to work at Google with some of my colleagues. And finally, being involved in this community gives me a little bit of extra say in terms of trying to get more of people from our communities to go through the interviews and to be matched with a host. So we do a lot of legwork behind the scenes to get candidates, successful candidates, matched with the right hosts, and also making sure their package moves along. So we're doing quite a lot of things, some visible, some a bit less visible behind the scenes, but we're quite actively involved in this space.
Something I know specifically for Amazon, and not limited just to Latin American people, but for any like underrepresented population, we have the Amazon Future Engineer Program. It's for those people in high schools that they are willing or would like to have some bachelor degree on engineering, but they might not have the possibilities because it's financial things or many other reasons. So in these programs, they can join it. So Amazon will be financially supporting these studies towards the engineering degree, and afterwards they can also join the company from that. And there's some other collaborations with other associations in order to bring people to engineering or scientific positions, even though they might not have the qualifications, let's say a PhD. So they look for other things in those cases.
All right, Rene, do you wanna add something? I know you.
No, I think everything I was going to say has been said already.
Okay, got it. And what about you, Fabian?
So I think that the way Adobe established relationship with the LXAI community or LX in AI community, I think one of the actions we have taken in this end is actually sponsoring LXAI. That's one of the actions we take externally. There is also one gift funding program. This is more general, but we have actually sponsored many LatinX professors or students through this gift funding program, which basically provides some funding for professors and students to do unlimited research. So basically unrestricted research. So we don't have any kind of they don't have any kind of compromise with Adobe at the end. So it's unrestricted research funding program. And then internally there is one network called OLA. It's basically a LatinX community within Adobe, which we also look externally for potential activities where we can actually engage with external organizations where some actions are taken around this LatinX in AI topic.
All right, thank you. So does anyone here has any question? Yeah. I assume somebody is gonna.
Thank you very much for this opportunity. My question is, what are the top 3 things a new graduate must do when he or she join a company? I am currently in my last semester of my PhD, so I would like to learn or know about that. That is my first question. The second question is, some positions, they are open for bachelor, masters, and PhDs. And sometimes one spend 4 or 5 years in doing PhD and finally end up in the same job opening, which requires a bachelor. So how should one leverage the master's or the PhD after joining the company to be able to grow professionally as well as a person? Thank you.
So who wants to start?
Thank you for your question. Those are totally valid concerns. I know PhDs take a long time, take a lot of effort, and you obviously want to be rewarded for that. One thing that I tell lots of people is the path to successful or your dream research career is not necessarily straight. So to take my case, I did my PhD and wasn't able to get a job in research, which is what I wanted. And so I actually left research for 5 or 6 years, and then later got an opportunity to come back into research and had to learn all about neural nets, because when I left, nobody was using neural nets. So the fact that you might feel like your PhD was not worth it if you're competing for jobs with people that have only a bachelor's degree, I don't think that's necessarily the best way to view it. So the PhD itself, while it is a title and it does grant you the ability to call yourself a doctor and all that, the most valuable thing of doing a PhD is actually the work that you did there. So being able to have a research project that you lead and that you drive to completion and that you defend before a committee, and learning the focus and the ability to do the literature survey and to design new experiments and all that. All of these things, despite the fact that the job requirement also allows bachelors, that will give you an advantage when you go into the into this job, because you've already honed all these skills, and so then you can apply these skills, you know, in showing leadership and in showing innovation and in showing initiative. These types of characteristics are what's used to promote you and to give you new challenges and these types of things. So I don't think you should necessarily see it as a bad thing to compete or get these things. It might put you at an advantage with respect to other candidates. And the other thing is that, you know, there's still a long way ahead of you, and whatever you've learned throughout your PhD will definitely help you along this path. And who knows, there might be another job that comes up later that does require a PhD, and then you're all set.
I would like to add that I don't like to see the PhD like the final step. It's actually, for me, it means just the beginning, because as he has said, it is a process through which you have gone that is giving you some skills to do something afterwards. So no matter what you actually did as the area of research, is more about what are the skills you acquire through that, and then when you go to apply to some position under someone with a bachelor, it doesn't mean that you're going to be on the same level or a different one. What we are going to check is, through that PhD, did you make the most of that? Did you learn these skills, like can you handle the ambiguity of dealing with a problem that has been not even defined? Probably someone who is a fresh graduate from bachelor degree is expecting someone else to do that definition. But they could have also some industry experience already in which they have been acquiring that. So I don't like it to see like just I'm bachelor or master's or PhDs like a final goal. It's just a learning process, and it's a first step.
So do you have something to add, Fabian or Rene?
Yeah, I can add something about the first question about the top 3 things to do like after you join a company. And I will say that this is from my experience in a research team. But yeah, I would say like this maybe the first point apply to any kind of like position, and it will be actually meet your team and your stakeholders. So being able to understand the priority of the team, like how the team operates, I think that is going to be pretty important for your career in that company or your growth in that company. So yeah, also understand the business needs. So understand all the products your company make, all the services your company make. Because at the end, like even if you are in a research position, you have to link your research on how to future value. And that's my third point. It will be actually maybe write a research statement that actually associates your research with, that somehow associates your research with potential future value. Yeah, I know like even if we're in a research position, we need to think about like what's the value this research will have in 5 years, 10 years, or X number of years. So linking that, I think, is going to be helpful overall for your growth in that company.
Yeah. And what about you, Rene?
Yeah, I wanted to say that at least my experience has not been that bachelors and masters and PhDs are ultimately, work in the same positions, and also their career path and growth are not really the same. In my experience, it's often the case that those that have a bachelor's might just be perhaps focusing more on software engineering aspects, while those that have a PhD will maybe be applied scientists. And I think that there are 2 different jobs that require different skills, and I think the people with a PhD will tend to have certain level of skills that are maybe very useful in terms of coming up with the new solutions that are going to be advantageous relative to existing ones, as opposed to perhaps if you only have a bachelor, you might be focused more on implementing something that's already out there.
All right, thank you. Is anyone here has any question? So I also have one. So I know that submit a paper in a top 3 conference like here, like ICML, CVPR, AAAI, it's really hard. So what are the skills or any advice to the people like to submit it a top-tier conference?
Like, I heard sometimes someone that said that like sometimes the idea are not everything. Like in a document like a paper, you're trying to put down your thinking. So for me, a good piece of advice is working on that writing a lot. Like practicing writing is a very useful skill, not only for publishing, but I think mostly in your life. And in this concrete use case, I think it's useful because it's going to make it easier for anyone who is going to review your work to understand what are the proposals that you have, what are the advantages or the novelty on it. But if it's really diffuse, it's really hard to tell if this is something so unique or if it's worth it to get published there or not.
Yeah, just to add to that a bit, I think also a really critical thing is to get feedback early on in your paper. This could be your supervisor or it could be colleagues, but it could also be mentors. So places like LatinX and AI do offer mentorship, and there's other mentorship opportunities, for instance with ML Collective as well, another great organization. And so if you're not totally sure about your paper, if your supervisor isn't providing the right guidance for you, then go to these mentoring sessions, seek out these mentors and get feedback on your papers. As Brian was saying, the writing is really essential to getting these papers accepted. It needs to be clear. That's one of the main points when you're reviewing papers is the clarity. So it has to be very, very clear. And I know for a lot of us that don't have English as our first language, sometimes the writing can be difficult. And this is where a mentor can really help polish that skill. And it's something that unfortunately just has to come with practice. So you just have to do a lot of it. So submitting to workshops like this is a great first step. It's a great practice. But I think if you want to go to the next level and start submitting to the main conferences, getting this type of mentorship is essential. Having said that, I think also more specific on the paper writing, something that I tell all my mentees is when you're writing a paper, one thing you have to have clear in your head is what's the elevator pitch. So what that means is if you're trying to describe your paper to somebody, can you describe it in one sentence or at most two? If you can't, then your message isn't clear enough. So you have to really be able to distill that into a clear proposal or a clear thesis that you're proposing in your paper. And then your paper also has to be legible in the sense that anybody that doesn't have the background, or at least maybe some basic background, should be able to follow your paper. So if it's too technical, if there's too much technical jargon, or if the writing isn't clear, in the sense that you're assuming people know the background of the field that you're working in, it's not going to be a successful paper. And these are the types of things that are hard to determine just by yourself, because you know the subject, you're an expert in this field, so it all seems clear to you. So getting this feedback from other people, getting your colleagues to read your paper and tell you what they think early on is really important. So definitely don't start writing a paper, definitely not a week before a deadline. You should start actually a few months before the deadline. I know some people set a limit, so 6 weeks before the deadline. Some supervisors I know do this. If you don't have a first draft, then we're not submitting to the conference. And I actually think, I mean, I don't do it that harshly, but I kind of try to follow that with the people I'm advising, because it takes a lot of time to polish the paper and get it to the point where it's successful.
Thank you, Paulo. Any advice, Rene?
I agree with the vast majority of what's been said. I do agree that writing is critical and clarity is critical. I would complement with what I tell my students often is that, they often get upset when the papers are rejected. And often the reviews say things that my students think that don't make any sense. They're illogical. How could they not understand this? And I always try to tell my students to think backwards, to put yourself in the shoes of the reviewers. If the reviewer said X, what did I write inadequately or not sufficiently clearly that led the reviewer to make that comment? And I think asking you or asking the students to think that way helps them rewrite with a way that is clear. At the same time, though, and I think this is a critique I have to the current reviewing process. The comment that Pablo made that if it is too technical, it's not going to go through. The challenge I see with that, though, is that we end up watering down the papers to a level that is understood by everybody. I see that also as a challenge, right? Because at the end of the day, papers need to have a technical contribution, and they need to be understood not by everybody, but by the experts. And so I think there is a way of doing high quality technical writing, and that doesn't mean that we need to water down what we do. And a big critique of the current reviewing process, I think, it is a lottery. There is a random process of getting the right reviewers for your paper. And when you get the adequate reviewers, you get good feedback and it is accepted on the merit. But you can get reviewers that maybe were not adequate and they were impressed by something they shouldn't have been impressed, and vice versa. And so I think it is a random process, and not getting upset for a rejection is important because it's far from perfect.
Do you have something to add, Fabian?
I think this is like fantastic summary from all the analysts here, like on how to make a successful submission. Like definitely starting writing early, I think is critical. I will also add like reading. Like I think like writing, of course, I mean you need a lot of time and practice to master writing, but actually reading papers, especially in the specific domain you're trying to submit, will give you an idea how the paper should look like, how the experimental section is organized, how the technical part is organized, how the typical introduction looks like. So I think like there is a common style in most papers you see like in one particular community. So understanding the style and adding your own flavor, I think it becomes essential as well to making a successful submission. That's the only thing I will add, and basically I agree pretty much with all that other panelists said before.
All right, thank you. So I also have one question. It's more related, like in the general question. You know that there are many ways to like a structure or build data science / machine learning teams. So based on your experience, what have you seen work or not work?
I would like to know what does it mean work for you?
Like successful with a project.
I could keep asking, but I'm assuming like the team generates something that is valuable. Okay.
Yeah. So I want like any skill. So for example, to create like I don't know, like a machine learning project is not only the model itself. It's more than like annotate the data, like how to put this model in production. So that kind of things.
Okay, now I see you. So I think in that way work means that it is going to have an impact more than just doing the research or maybe publishing something, but it's now taking the idea into a real system working for the company. And obviously for doing that, you need people that can not only do the research but also implement it. In my case and in my experience, I've been at Amazon at 2 different teams, and both I would say they were successful in those regards. They have production-like systems, but they were quite different. In one of them, we were all applied scientists only, like 10 applied scientists and 1 or 2 support engineers. In the other one, the ratio is completely different. There are more engineers than applied scientists. So I think it's going to be successful if there is a combination of different backgrounds, of different type of people, and not only scientists or engineers. There's also needs to be people that understands better what are the customer needs or what are the business entitlements and so on. So it is a combination of many, many different people, not just one type of it.
So to give a perspective from a purely research-focused team, I'd say impact here is getting research that's actively used by future researchers. Sometimes this does mean it gets used by product teams, but sometimes it just means that new science is built on top of that. And I think for having a successful team, I mean, I don't think there's one formula, but the teams that I've seen that have had the most success, I mean, the key element, and it's kind of obvious to say it, is having a good team synergy, so that the dynamics between team members is healthy and constructive. I think part of that is likely having, as Brian was saying, a diversity of people in there, not just in terms of job role, like software engineer or research scientist or backgrounds, but also in terms of level. So having both senior and junior people. If you have a room full of senior people, then it's too many cooks in the kitchen, and egos can get in the way, and it's difficult to operate in a space like that where everybody's senior. Then same can be said for a space where everybody is junior. So having a healthy balance of senior and junior, both actually grow in that space, because the senior people develop their skills of their management skills and their mentoring skills, and the junior people obviously are honing their technical skills. And this combination has worked really well in lots of teams that I've observed, but it's something that's a little hard to plan for in advance, because things always change. There's different head counts, there's different expertise of the people you're hiring, but having this in mind, I think, and being flexible in terms of team organization is key to success, I think.
Any comments from our mentors in virtual?
So just to add one comment is I think to make maybe a machine learning project successful, I would say is first step will be setting up the right goals, and set the expectations pretty clear about what's going to be the outcome of this project. Even though you said it from the beginning, I mean, being able as well to dynamically adapt them along the way is also an important component. And I also agree with Pablo on having a mix of different kind of expertise within the team, or different levels of expertise within the team, and circling back to the expectations. I think every member of the team should have a role and set the expectations of that person as well. It's going to be important. For instance, who's going to be the main driver? Who are going to be the advisors in this project? What does it mean to be the main driver in this project? What does it mean to be advisor in this project? I think setting up all these roles and being able to actually spell out what is expected from each team member, I think is essential to actually complete successfully a machine learning project.
Okay, thank you, Fabian. And what about you, Rene?
I think I agree with everything that's been said, so I won't add anything else.
Okay, thank you. So do we have any question from the venue? So in that case, I have another question. So based on your experience, during your PhD, your master, and also in your job experience, what are the most challenges that you have, for a project, for submit a paper, and how did you tackle that at that time?
I don't know, you might like my answer, but I think the most challenging is that you working with people, you have to understand, when, let's say you're junior, you have some senior people in your team, they might asking you or suggesting something to you. So I think is challenging to try to understand each other, to communicate effectively. I don't think that the technical things that you do are going to be the most challenging things you'll find in a job. It is always going to be, how do you do this collaboratively and not just by yourself? And adding to that, is also how to, I think it's also challenging to develop those skills. And what I mean by this is I could join a new research team or on another company. They might be working on something new. Like Pablo said, he left the academia and then came back and everyone was using neural networks. I will never say that's the challenge. Like you can try and learn, but the people is much more different. It's not just something that you grab a book and, oh, now I'm an expert managing people.
I think one of the challenges that many of us face in research is being able to maintain the vision, the long-term vision of whatever your project is. We were talking about the low quality of reviews that we sometimes receive, and as a student and as an academic, the feedback the official feedback we receive are these reviews at conferences, which can often be frustrating. But the quality of your research isn't necessarily defined by one set of reviews, and being able to sort of go beyond that and continue that line of work. So just one rejection doesn't mean that your research is worthless and you have to stop. You have to sort of continue pushing hard, but also be critical of your work. So maybe it is a line of research that you shouldn't keep on pushing that hard. I think keeping an open mind, not being too tied to whatever it was you were proposing, opening your mind to whatever the reviewers say, but also being cognizant that reviewers can often be wrong. So as long as you believe in your work, that's, I think, one of the challenges, being able to convince yourself that your work is worthwhile and pushing through all the adversity that we face as academics, because research is a long game.
All right, thank you. Any comments from our virtual sponsor panelists?
No comments from me.
And maybe I can add something. I mean, biggest challenge for me, I think, like, as a relatively junior researcher, like, is actually being able to formulate the right research questions. Usually during your PhD, I think you get some exposure of that, but you get a lot of help from your PhD advisor on formulating the right questions. But once you move into a later phase, when you actually graduate your PhD, actually you need to start thinking about, like, which is like my long-term vision, what is my long-term research direction. So I think that's one of the hardest challenges, like, you may face. And also, as have been mentioned before, I think, like, learning the skills to actually mentor people and manage people as well is something that is pretty challenging.
Okay.
Or it has been pretty challenging, yeah.
Okay. So I also have one question. So I have experience also in industry and academia for a while, but at some points, when you tackle a problem, at the beginning, it seems like using machine learning is the right solution, but at the end, it didn't. So how do you face it with any similar situation in your past experience?
Yeah, I think it's a common pitfall when you're a student. Like, you are like someone with a new toy, and you're trying to play with it everywhere. And in the industry, in my experience, that's not the way to success, because I think René said, we are starting from customers' needs, and then you see what is going to solve that. It's not like, I'm going to develop this model or this transformer and it's solving this with this precision. But then when we go to deploy it, it's useless for us because it has this latency or whatever. This has happened to me in the industry, like saying, this is probably going to be solved with this ML solution, and sometime later you find like it's not that good, or a simpler solution is doing it better. That was the lesson, to say, not just try to play with the tools you want to test because you want to learn about it. Just go from the need and try to think, is this the right thing I have to do? Or is this the right solution for this problem? Am I choosing the right tools for the need? Doing that at the beginning is going to help you decide what to do next, and it's also going to reduce a lot of trouble, costs related to the company and many other problems.
So in my experience, often, because I'm a reinforcement learning researcher, I do collaborate with people from other fields of machine learning, and they have approached me with project ideas, which the project themselves are very nice, and but they preface it with, we'd like to use reinforcement learning for this new idea. And my response is always, why? Why do you want to use reinforcement learning? Of course, it kind of fits because it's a sequence of decisions, whatever. But for me, the key is to first formulate the problem very clearly. So what are your inputs? What are your desired outputs? Often the problems don't even have that specification. It's a very high level, vague specification. And so then it seems like reinforcement learning fits. But once you specify clearly what the inputs and the outputs are, often what you can find is, okay, well, now that I've laid out the problem like this, this is, for instance, a planning problem. Because using reinforcement learning jargon, the state space is finite, it's deterministic, it's a relatively small problem. So why do I want to use reinforcement learning? I can just use a planner. And so that's the first starting point. Use a planner, and then you have a baseline. And then you can see maybe the planner solves your problem for you. You don't need any other fancy techniques. Maybe it doesn't, but at least you have a baseline. Often when starting a new project, there's a lot of upfront costs in terms of building the infrastructure, building the pipelines, making sure all your shapes match and all that stuff. So going right into the most complex solution, because it seems like that'll be fancier, isn't always the best idea. So really start formalizing the problem with pen and paper, inputs, outputs. That's what you need, and once you have that, I think the solution that best fits might not be the one that you initially thought.
Yeah, so any comments, Rene?
Yeah, I completely agree with everything that's been said. I would say in addition that understanding the problem and understanding what are the best solutions for that problem, exploring maybe the more likely candidate good solutions is critical. I've seen many examples where, for example, in geometry and computer vision, you know that the problem has a solution that is not unique. The reconstruction is not unique. And people that say, well, I'm just going to train a deep network that is going to do it. And just because you do that, they think that it's going to solve the problem. But it doesn't, because there are constraints that arise from the problem that if you understand the problem well, you would realize that maybe that machine learning approach was not the right one. And so I think thinking deeply, formulating, spending a lot of time in problem formulation and identifying what are the best strategies for solving a problem before jumping into a fancy solution, I think it's a great advice.
Okay, thank you. Fabian, any comments to that?
I think I agree pretty much with all other panelists say, so I'm gonna skip this time.
Okay, so I think that we have another question from the venue.
Okay, I think it's working. Yeah, my question is, given that each of the panelists are working on different companies, what is the experience in terms of metric for success? In your own role in your company, how is success being measured? Is either measured by publication, patents, product? How do you measure? What is the metric that is most common for your current position?
Should we start with the online?
Yeah, okay, so do you want to start, Rene?
I think that Amazon has a system of evaluation that is based on whether, you can find them online. There are all of these principles that Amazon follows. And the evaluation of everyone is whether you succeeded in as many principles as possible. So that's one. The other one, naturally, as in any company, is the impact of what you do to the bottom line. I think for every research idea that eventually gets translated into a product, there is alpha beta testing, and it is evaluated how much that impacts. But at the end of the day, that's not just that. You could have people that are that what they do impacts the bottom line. But I don't think there is metrics that are very, very hard in terms of number of papers or things like that. And this is also true in academia, right? We don't give tenure to faculty based on the number of papers they published. So I think there is always an evaluation that is subjective as well. Let me stop there.
Any comments to Brian?
Yeah, so I can speak a little bit from my perspective, at least in a research position as well. So I think like the way we're measured, as well as Rene mentioned, is not by number of papers or number of patents or number of tech transfer. I don't think a number itself will cover your evaluation. So we internally have a process called checking process. So basically you meet with your manager every 3 months, every 6 months. And then there is an annual evaluation at the end where you actually put together a document where you say, okay, I work in this research area. These were my goals at the beginning of the year. I did meet my goals. I didn't meet my goals. And depending on that, you get evaluated at the end. So that's the process itself. But actually what matters, in my opinion, it matters how much impact you have in the company. And this can be measured, or this can have multiple indirect ways to measure it, right? At the end, it matters how much impact you produce in the company, right? But impact could be like a direct tech transfer that is being used by millions of users. It actually ends up producing a lot of revenue. That's one way to measure impact. But another impact could be like you are actually leading a research topic. You are being recognized by being a leader in academia, and you're actually motivating more researchers to work in an area that may be beneficial for the company down the line, right? So measuring impact is tricky. So I don't think there is a direct way to convert like number of papers or patents towards your final evaluation. But I will say all these things count like as a package. I will say like if you are actually consistently publishing in an area or like creating or like submitting patents in an area, you're going to be starting to be recognized in the company as the leader in this space. And I think that could count as impactful work throughout the year.
I would like to add that in my experience, what I've been seeing is also growth. It's not only how you're doing, but are you like plateauing? Like you've been doing the same for several years. It's all good, but we can identify it if it's going to stop growing. So that is something very easy to notice as you can self-evaluate yourself. Like I've been receiving feedback whenever I'm doing my annual review or performance review and so on. So am I doing something with this or just ignoring that? In my case, that has always been the key to say this has been a good year or not. And I will say that I will encourage everyone, like not only in the industries, you can do that during your PhD with your advisor, like am I getting feedback also from papers? So am I doing something with this? And growth is also a very important one, not only for the industry. I think we have to be a bit selfish here as well. It's your career. So you are the owner of that, and you should be doing something with that feedback.
So to maybe take a bit of a different approach to answering this question. So I agree with everything that's being said in terms of evaluating impact or measuring success. But I also find that the model in which we operate is very focused on, if you're in industry, on promotion, for instance, right? So if you're not working towards promotion, you're not working hard enough. And I totally disagree with that. I think it's your career, but it's also your life. And so, you know, the standard saying is you work to live, you don't live to work. And so if you're doing what you like and you're at a level where the amount of impact you're having is sufficient for your happiness and it allows you to maintain a healthy work-life balance that works for you, that's fine. In my perspective. So I don't think you necessarily have to be thinking about how do I get to the next level, because then you're optimizing for something different. You're optimizing for that promotion or that increased paycheck. Maybe you do need that. Everyone's personal circumstances are the same. But if your personal circumstances allow you to sort of be satisfied at your current level, I think that's a totally fine thing to do, and it's a totally fine decision to make. And who knows, I mean, just by doing what you love and having passion about it, for the work itself, not necessarily for the promotion, often does end up being rewarded eventually because of the amount of effort you put into it.
All right, guys, thank you for your time. So we are time over. So for the virtual attendees, from attended here, so keep an eye from any mentorship activity in the future, in the future videos in ICML and CBPR. So thank you for your time. So I appreciate also your time, Fabian and Rene. So we appreciate your time here. All right, guys. So I hope we can.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I hope we can see you soon, in another videos, at CBPR probably or ICCB in October. All right, guys. So we are going to to close the marks from the.
Yes. Thank you, everyone. Thank you to our mentors for joining us today.